Welcome to People First by AllVoices. I'm your host, Jeffrey Fermin. Today, we're tackling a topic that doesn't get enough attention, in my opinion. It's how managers can give supportive feedback to employees with disabilities as well as neurodiverse team members. With me, I have Lia Seth, Director of People over at Cylinder. Just a little bit more about yourself, your background, and what you're up to nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am located in Seattle. I work at a remote first company called Cylinder Health, like you shared. I've been in health tech for the last, 5 years. So I just really love the space. I love what I do in HR, supporting people, building relationships, making sure people have the resources they need, and especially doing that in companies that have a really strong mission towards helping other people. So it's just sort of like I help the people who help the people. So I really, really love what I get to do.
Yes, and we've had a lot of conversations about Seattle. You even influenced me to write about how much I love the city of Seattle. So, do you want to just say something nice about the city before we get into the topic?
I mean, if you want the entire podcast to be about Seattle, careful about getting me started. But I will say it never gets old that I get to see mountains every day. I love where I live. I feel really, really lucky to live here.
Amazing. I hope that like somebody in the like tourism board over there sees this, gets this clip, and they put it all over the airports.
Hell yeah.
Um, s- so let's start with our first question, right? How can managers give feedback that supports disabled and neurodiverse employees?
Absolutely. So, really, my big philosophy is that performance and feedback should never be a surprise. So that always starts earlier than like a formal review. So the feedback should be consistent. It should be all the time. It should come from the start. So expectations should be set from the beginning when an employee starts their role, when they first get hired, when they get promoted. If a new manager comes on, they should make that really clear. Hey, here's what I expect from you in this role. And that way, if someone's not meeting those expectations, you have kind of that clear foundation. If someone isn't meeting your expectations, but you never told them what those expectations are, that's not really fair to give feedback of like, hey, you're not meeting these invisible made up expectations that only I knew about. And I mean that really goes for everyone, right? That's not unique to disabled employees, but I always love the philosophy that when you design for the most marginalized, you design for everyone. So these are really best practices for all employees, but it is extra important, especially for those with neuroatypical brains who might process information differently, and who might take feedback in different ways. It's important for managers to remember not everyone is going to think and operate the same way you do. So, in giving that feedback, I think really just making sure that things are super clear and super transparent is the perfect foundation to start with.
Yeah, and in Hibba's podcast, I Hate It Here, you made a couple of great points around, access being very different from accessibility. They're not the same things. Um, just want to hear you elaborate more on that saying and what you meant by that.
Yeah, definitely. Access is about being able to get to something. So if you say, okay, do you have access to the employee handbook? Yes, I know exactly where it's located. It's located on the intranet, or there's a hard copy behind the front desk, whatever it might be. Every employee gets a binder. Do you have accessibility to that handbook? Is that handbook accessible is different from do you have access to it? So is the handbook accessible? Maybe you physically know where it is, you know where to find the words that are written in the handbook, but can you understand them? Are they written in a way that you know what they mean, you know what you're supposed to do with them? I gave this example before. I always love to give this example. I had a handbook once where it was totally legally compliant. It met all of the needs of the states we were located in, but I had multiple employees call me and say, "Hey, I don't understand the jury duty policy. It says that we offer, coverage for jury duty, but what do I need to do? And am I going to be paid for those days? How does that work? Do I need to submit proof?" It wasn't laid out in there. It was written in such dense legalese that was super compliant with the law and was like, we are meeting the requirements of the state of California where we were headquartered, but no one knew what to do with it. So the information was not accessible, even though the employees had access to it. And I think there's a lot of parallels there with performance. You might say, hey, you've got a copy of your job description. You have access to the expectations, but have you as a manager explained to the employee what those mean? Have you gone through them and said, okay, you're responsible for running this report. Do you know what that means? Do you know what that should look like? Here's what I want that report to look like every quarter. Here's when I need to see it. Here's the format it should be in. Be super, super clear, because you might think you've given them the information, but if you haven't gotten to that level of detail, you might not be speaking about the same thing.
Well put. And to the topic of like performance reviews, right? Like excuse me, what adjustments make performance reviews fair for people with different communication and processing styles?
Yeah, one thing I love to do is managers should ask about preferred feedback. We have at Cylinder a full performance management system and feedback system that we love, and we're going through annual reviews right now. People are writing their self reviews. Managers are going to be writing their responses. Some managers will share their written responses before they have that conversation with the employee to talk about, okay, here's, my responses to your annual performance. Some managers will say, I'm going to have this live conversation with you, and then I will share my written feedback afterwards so you can process that. And what I always encourage managers to do is think about your own preferences and then ask your employees if they have a preference. Some of them might not, but some of them might say, I really need to see what you've written down so I have a chance to fully process everything you've shared with me before I'm ready to have a conversation. And I can't focus in that conversation if everything's a surprise and I don't know what's coming. Some employees might say, I don't need to see anything written down. Like, let's have a conversation about it so that I understand all the nuances, and then I'll look at what you've written down later. It should not be a one size fits all. So I think the adjustment to make is individualize it. Ask your employees what works best for them. Think about the resources, the limitations of the systems you might use. Talk to your HR teams and think about, is the process that we're following right now the best process for everyone? And are there changes we could make so that people can feel good about the information that they're getting and the way that they're able to process it? Similarly, if you're going to be having live conversations with someone outside of like a performance review, a feedback portal, you're just in a one-on-one, you're chatting with someone, you're like, hey, by the way, in this meeting, I noticed you presented this information this way. In the future, it would be really helpful to do it this way. Not a problem. Just let me give you some feedback and some changes on how you can be more successful. Some team members might be like, great, got it. I'm going to go forward with that. Some folks might say, I really need this like written down. I think it's so helpful to document any kind of conversation like that. Take notes together, have a shared document where you can say, here's what we talked about, here's what we agreed on. Some people see this as a CYA thing. I just think it's helpful for, again, those clear expectations. There's no confusion. Everyone's on the same page because you've had the conversation and now you have a written record of like, this is what we talked about. This is what we agreed on. For folks who are neuroatypical, for folks who may have ADHD and may not have as much of the ability to like process and remember in the same way. Like, let's say they're having that one-on-one and then they're about to run to a team meeting and then maybe, they've got a doctor's appointment right after that. If they don't have time to process that because they're running around, they might not be able to remember later, like, oh, shoot, I think my manager gave me feedback about the way that I'm sharing this and now I can't remember what it was. Write it down and then it's there. Same thing with so many other conditions. There's so many reasons why writing things down is helpful for everyone.
A lot of great points. I feel like there's a couple more examples that I'd love to get out of you. You mentioned that one size fits all reviews typically, leave neurotypical employees at a disadvantage. How do you avoid them as a people leader, a manager, or even as an organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think about the specific needs of the role, usually for pretty much any role, it's about output. It's not about necessarily how that work is getting done as long as the results are there. And I've worked with so many managers who will say, if they just did it this way, then they'd be successful. They should just do it the way I do it. This is how I would run this process, so that's how my team needs to run it. Think about if that is the best way. Think about if it's the only way. For some folks, it might be like, hey, the way I run this report is I'm going to gather all my data on Monday. I'm going to spend Tuesday reviewing it. Wednesday, I'm going to do a draft. Thursday, I'll take a final look at it with fresh eyes and then it'll be ready to go on Friday. Other people might say, I can't even start thinking about this until Wednesday, but then I'm going to block off 3 hours and just get it all done. Take one more look before I send it off Friday morning and I'm good. Those are both valid ways of running a report, and it might be the same output. You might still get the same correct information, the same analysis, but you think about the way people's brains work. Some people can't chunk out projects into multiple sessions. They need to have that dedicated focus time to get something done. Other folks can't focus for that amount of time, and they need to be able to just kind of snippet it in to wherever their schedule allows. It's again like if you're designing for the most marginalized, you're designing for everyone. This doesn't just help people with neuroatypical brains. This doesn't just help people with disabilities. Think about how this might help working parents, for example, who are only able to catch snippets of time between childcare pickup and school drop off and activities and whatever else might be going on. Maybe they'll say, okay, I've got this dedicated time to work while my kid's in daycare. And then there's pickup, there's dinner, there's bath time, there's all this stuff, but I'm going to be productive again at 8 p.m. If you tell them, no, you have to get your work done between 10 and 2, and that's when I expect to see you online, that might not work for their schedule. It might not work for their brain. But if at the end of the day, you're getting that report on Friday and it's accurate, it doesn't really, really matter how they do it. So the one size fits all element, I think, really comes around to ways of working. How are you looking at your team's performance, and are you judging it on the right things, which again is output?
Perfect. Yeah. I have to ask a question. We are an AI first company and it is, in mode right now. Do you feel like AI has the potential to maybe help in this particular instance where I don't know, it could be getting information from knowledge bases, providing a lot of information very quickly and whatever platforms exist out there that could potentially help out there. Is there some way AI could potentially fill in a gap or help out?
I think there's ways it can help, there's ways it can hurt. It depends on how you're using it, right? Um, I know that it's built into almost every system at this point. I've worked with a lot of different companies, a lot of a lot of different tech stacks, and at this point, any company that doesn't have AI built in some way, it seems like it's getting left behind, for better or worse. So you think about going back to the idea of performance and feedback. A lot of managers will use AI as a starting point. They'll say, okay, I want to use AI to write my first draft of this person's performance review. Maybe they'll upload a couple months of one-on-one notes and add a couple of emails in there and just be like, here's some things that I've talked to this person about. Go ahead and write me a first draft review. That's fine to start. Or like, what can I say for, where's 3 places that this person could grow in the next year? Oh, I don't know what to say. What does AI tell me? That's fine, but think about that then from the human lens once you have that first draft. Does this speak to what they actually need? Does this speak to, again, the real needs of the role? Remember that AI is imperfect. It's biased because it's built off of human interaction, which is also biased. So it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be the final version of anything. You always need to remember that it's going to be built off of a neurotypical experience. So there's going to be times when a manager will look to AI of how do I give feedback to this person? And that feedback is going to be written in a very, very one lens way that isn't going to translate to everyone. And you'll want to make sure, again, is this using plain language that this person will be able to understand? Am I actually clear in my expectations? Is this accurate? Those factors all come in when thinking about AI. And then from the employee experience, similarly, you can use it to start writing your own self-review. You can use it to say, hey, what goals should I set this year? I'm a engineer and I want to be a senior engineer. Here's some of the projects I've worked on. What should my goals be this year that I should set? Are those reasonable? Are those goals that actually help the business? There's so many ways to look at it, but I'm kind of like I use AI, absolutely, but I'm always a cautious user, and it's only for first drafts for me. So it's something I think that sometimes people will use it as their like submit, copy paste, and I'm done. And that's a very dangerous way to use it.
All that's extremely valid. I tend to not operate like that because I use it mostly for marketing, right? Creating copy and has a lot of bias in there when you're writing a certain phrases and certain things in certain ways. So I don't know. I don't like the outputs that it puts out there. It's definitely a great starting point, but your initial thoughts, feelings don't necessarily come out and get out there. All right, going back to the subject matter. So, what resources are out there? What people should we be following? I know that you're extremely passionate about the subject, and what exists, and who should we be following in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many resources out there. There are so many great people who are talking about this, doing the work, really vocal about making sure that inclusivity is first in performance, that we're not thinking about everything from one perspective, that there's multiple ideas, multiple resources kind of considered when you're building any kind of process, when you're building out any kind of structure. So I spend more time than I probably should on LinkedIn. I'm there all the time. I cannot tell you how many times I've opened up a tab of LinkedIn and then been like, "Oops, I already have a tab of LinkedIn open where I was doing something else." But there are some really, really great folks out there who are building some really cool things. I would definitely be remiss if I didn't mention Marion. I know who you've had on the podcast earlier. She's fantastic. She's got a lot to say and is just one of my favorite, like, real talk people who will just tell it like it is. Greer is someone else, and I'm sure you can link all these folks because I'm not gonna, like, rattle off all their LinkedIns, but Greer is amazing. Um, who am I forgetting? Gosh, I should have had a list ready to go.
That's
Uh,
totally my fault, by the way.
no,
Um,
no, all good. I was gonna say, Danny Herrera is fantastic. She has so many cool things to say about inclusivity, not just from a neuroatypical perspective, but also from a racial perspective and making sure that there's the right people in the room when you're making decisions. I think that's one of the biggest things to think about is when you're building a process, when you're looking at a new system, when you're thinking about, okay, we're writing a job description for this, who is in the room when you're making those decisions? Who is the one who's drafting those? Who's the one who's vetting things, looking at things? If that room isn't diverse, and again, by diverse, I don't just mean by gender and race. I mean by ability, I mean by background, I mean by class status, I mean by industry, any number of things. If that room is not diverse, your decision making is not going to be completely successful. It's going to be flawed because you're missing perspectives. When you think about building for people, you're not just building for one kind of person. You're not just building for yourself. You're building for a whole community of people, a whole company of people, most likely, that represent diverse abilities, diverse backgrounds, diverse ways of thinking. So you want to make sure that you're thinking about that when you're building, when you're giving feedback, when you're talking about performance. The biggest advice I can give, honestly, is practice. If you have a good HR team, walk through different scenarios with them. I've helped managers with like scripts for conversations where they're like, "Oh, I need to give this employee feedback and I just don't know how to do it," or, "Oh, I'm not sure how to talk to this employee about this." You can script it out. If you have a good HR team, work with them. This is another way you can use AI, again, as a first draft. Say, I'm dealing with this situation with my employee. I want to give them feedback. What can I tell them? Use that as a starting point, and then ideally take it to a human who can look at it and help you kind of craft the right message there. If you don't have an HR team that you rely on, there are some really wonderful contractors and consultants out there who would be happy to give you their time. I won't say give you their time. They would be happy for you to pay them for their time because this is real work, to make sure that you're building in those conversations and scripts with all of these things in mind.
Very well put. Please pay um, our friends out there. And a lot of folks that you've mentioned, we have already featured Danny Herrera. I jokingly called her mi prima inteligente on LinkedIn the other day. She is like my smart cousin. She's brilliant, and Marion brilliant, and I'm gonna have Greer on here eventually. I messaged her recently, and I have a feeling she's going to be terrific. And I actually connected with her because of the Rethinkability conference. And then funny enough, I reached out to you because I saw that, and I immediately thought of you. And I'm just curious to hear what was your role over there, or what part did you play with Rethink?
Yeah, so Rethinkability started at the beginning of this year, end of last year. I don't remember exactly, but it started as a conversation where a group of us kind of got together and we were just having all of these little individual conversations saying there's not enough resources out there. So many companies are getting disability inclusion wrong. We're helping them one off or kind of providing little like piecemeal resources, but wouldn't it be great if we could have one holistic conversation where we bring all of these people who are doing the work together to have a larger conversation, to provide real resources, to build something together, even to come together and say, what can we do with these real world issues we're dealing with, these real world situations? How can we solve those? And that morphed into Rethinkability, which we launched as a podcast earlier this year, which was a really, really wonderful experience. We had conversations with some really incredible people about the disability experience at work, inclusion, accessibility. It was really, really meaningful, and that podcast is still out there. And then we're going to be having a 3-day conference in October where there's going to be panels and conversations, and again, some hands on elements where managers, HR leaders, anyone who is interested in this can come together and, talk about this and learn and have real tangible takeaways that you can then take back to work and say, great, now I can make my workspace, my company that much more inclusive, that much more accessible for people. Because I will tell you, I've had these conversations, like I said, piecemeal all the time. And every time I have them, every time I share something, every time I have a conversation, someone reaches out and says, this meant so much to hear because, I'm disabled. I've had this experience, but like, I don't know how to talk about it at work, or I don't know how to tell my manager, or I don't know how to ask for an accommodation. And giving those resources just feels so good because I know that this is something real that people can take away and actually make something with. They can go back to work and say, I know now how to ask for what I need, or I know now how to better support my employees. That kind of tangible takeaway is so key.
Yeah, just wow, that's great. Like I have to say personally, whenever I think of the prism or the phrase DEI, I have my own little bias. I'm Hispanic, so I've never looked at, and previously, especially previous to this conversation, I've never really looked at DEI really as can't even say it right, accessibility type of initiative. And I just want to say, like, this talk, this chat, and some of the things that you all have been doing online has really kind of opened up my world in terms of realizing that, like, hey, it's not just people that might like look like me or look diverse, but it's also, individuals that need that might have, neuroatypical type of I don't know if minds is the proper word, but people that might need help with accessibility, whatever the case is. I just really want to thank you for this, and I think it's been great. I'm going to do my best to create as many clips as possible from this, and really give you a larger platform, or do whatever we can here at All Voices to get you out there. But yeah, thank you for expanding my mind, and I hope this talk and this conversation has like that effect with people out there.
I appreciate that so much, and thank you, and I feel the same. I'm really like I said, I'm always so fired up when I get to talk about this because it matters so much to me, and it just feels amazing knowing that anytime I get to talk about this, it can hopefully reach someone who, needed those words or needed those resources or needed those tools in that moment.
Thank you so much. And yes, this chat is great. I look forward to like sharing it with everyone that follows All Voices and our newsletters, wherever you may find. I'm going to also go ahead and put your LinkedIn as well as where we can find you in the description. But more importantly, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us.
Absolutely, Jeff. This was a great chat. I'm really glad we got to do this.